Hello and welcome back to the lab. Today on the bench we have some back-end equipment. So in the lab I talked a little bit about the computer and data side of the lab that we've got going on. And I've been in the middle of some rebuilds, refreshes, and upgrades. So I figured I'd bring you guys along for the ride, since part of the reason of this channel is to talk about the lab itself, not just work in it, but how to work on it. So I have on the bench a couple of different networking options because we're going to be upgrading. Not going to be doing the bench today, but I have some plans to upgrade the data on the bench so we can start doing some data collection with some of the newer gear. But I am upgrading the data connection for the CAD computer, which does all the editing for YouTube, and my other computer that I use on the regular. I've been running gigabit for a while, and I was really starting to feel the speed, especially when working with video files, things like that. And as part of updating some of the back-end stuff, I had to move quite a bit of data. So I decided to take the plunge and upgrade to 2 gig. That's been interesting. I have a mismatch of cable in the wall because I have Cat 5e in the wall. And you can get faster than 1 gig on Cat 5e as long as the runs are short enough. Mine are short enough where they will certify to 5 gig. So 2.5 seemed to be a happy medium. I've been having some trouble with that. Windows has been really, really cranky when it comes to the 2.5 gig hardware. And I think this is a Windows 11-ish problem, but I've also had 10 do some things too, where when the computer came out of sleep, the network card wouldn't start right. I had to power down the board, unplug the NIC, let it sit. Just some really weird networking stuff. Now, the switches didn't change. Actually, one of the switches got upgraded to a half 2.5 gig. But the data cable in the wall didn't change, and I was having issues on more than just one machine. So I'm still working through that. 2 of the machines were behaving and had 0 problems. The other 2 have been weird, and I've kind of gotten the troubleshooting down to driver issues. So we can do a deeper dive in that if you guys would like. Hit me up in the comments down below if we want to do a deeper dive on some high-speed data. What we've got going on right now is this is the line for the editing computer that we're going to run. We're going to talk about this because this has turned out to be really good stuff. And I have made some mistakes. We're going to talk about that as well. And we're going to toss in some pitfalls. So to hope if you guys decide to take this plunge, you don't run into the same things I did. So first off, if you look at high-speed networking, you can get cards like this. And if we note, this one is stamped FC. So this is actually not an Ethernet card, even though it kind of looks like it. It's QLogic. They make network cards, and they also make what's called fiber channel interface cards. This is a fiber channel card. So what this is actually for is for SanDisk enclosures. This lets the external hard drive show up to the machine as internal storage. So you can have bootable machines on hard drives that aren't in the same box as the processor. That is not the topic of today's conversation. I just wanted you to be aware that there are such a thing as fiber channel cards, and not all cards with this port are created equal. Case in point, here are 2 cards. Both are made by QLogic. This bottom one is a 8 gigabit fiber channel HBA. This top one is a 10 gigabit Ethernet NIC. This is the one we're going to be using, not the fiber channel. So there's a couple ways to connect something to this. Is you can get a cable, which is a direct attach cable, and you can get 10 gigs over copper. Those cables are coming down in price significantly, but they have a very short length specification. I believe the last time I checked, they are good for 9 meters, and that's it. Now, if you're running in a rack, switch to switch, switch to server, things like that, 9 meters is plenty. You can direct attach all day long, and as a matter of fact, I did. A lot of the servers that helped me out here in the lab, they're direct attached to the switches but they're co-resident in the same rack. The Problem is the CAD computer and a couple of other computers are not co-resident in the rack. So how do I get the high-end data connection or high-speed data connection out to the CAD computer? That's where this comes in. This is actually a fiber optic cable. Now, this is pretty bulky for a fiber optic cable, but it was relatively inexpensive for fiber. This cable cost me $40. So the best part about this cable is this is a duplex. Actually, it'll do 100 gig. This is OW3 fiber cable with an LC connector. Nice thing about this connector is if you need to, the polarity can be switched, because on one side the laser has to talk to the receiver on the other and vice versa. So it gets a full duplex connection, and there's 2 fibers in here. Those 2 fibers are encased in Kevlar, and that Kevlar encasement is encased in armor cable. So this is actually armored fiber cable, and I bought 2 bundles now. The 168 foot was, I think, $70. This is the shorter version. I think this is just shy of 100 feet, and it was like $40. So this is going to go from the switch over to this network card, which is going to be in the editing machine. The way we convert this port, and you have to be careful on this, is to get 10 gig, these have to be SFP plus ports. There's also SFP ports. SFP ports will support 1 through 8 gig. SFP plus is what's needed for 10 gig. I've always heard these as called GBX, but I've seen them listed as GBs. This is what takes this is essentially a transceiver module, and it has a receiver and a sender, so it has a laser and then a receiver, and this is what takes the electric data from the NIC and converts it to light for the fiber. Right now, this was what I ended up with in the beginning. I did not spend enough money on these. It was $12 for the kit of 2. One of them was busted. You do need 2 because you need 1 NIC side and you need 1 switch side. So I have actually gone and gotten the actual Ubiquiti GBX, and I'm going to be using those going forward. So I have 4 of those on order. They will show up tomorrow as of the recording of this video. So we'll have 1 in the computer, and we'll have 1 in the switch to give me 10 gig over an optical fiber, and I'm going to have this in the walls. The way it's running right now, and I've got it all tested so I know the cable's good, is one of these had laser output, so it worked. The laser output on these is 850 nanometers, and this is multi-mode fiber. I got the 300 meter transceivers. If you need to go longer distances, there are 20 kilometer transceivers in duplex. And with multi-mode fiber, you can get 20 kilometers if you get a good enough cable and you have the correct transceivers on both ends. This transceiver was actually out of the QLogic fiber channel drives. The transceivers don't have to be fiber channel because they're just a converter. So what makes it a fiber channel card is the card that's behind the transceiver, not the transceiver itself. So even though this was on a fiber channel card, I'm using this right now for 10 gig networking, and it's working barely. The computer's not onlining correctly, and I'm having to go through some steps to get the connection up and running. But that's because I'm overclocking this transceiver at the moment, and that'll be fixed tomorrow when the new GBICs come in. Because I have a 10 gig GBIC on one side, and I have an 8 gig GBIC on the computer side, and it's getting a little cranky. When the Ubiquiti ones come in, we'll throw them in front of the camera so you guys can see them. They won't look much different. They'll have a different label on them, but they have to fit in the hole, and pretty much all GBICs look like that. Really, really nice, inexpensive armored fiber cable. This came from Amazon. I've got GBICs coming from Ubiquiti. We did dive down the Ubiquiti rabbit hole, and I have set up some, gone deeper down their networking stack. But after I get this hooked up, we can talk a little bit how the networking is done here in the lab and some future plans for what we've got going on. Okay, trials and 10 gig networking. So, new network card has come in. I've done even more testing, lots of troubleshooting. For you guys, it's been 30 seconds. For me, it's been about 3 days trying to figure out what was going on. And I have come to find out some interesting things. So these were the cards I was trying to use, and you'll notice there's quite a pile of them here. These are QL 8442 CU cards. So these are 10 gig Ethernet, but they can also do fiber channel and a couple of other things. These cards are very confusing and also don't work. But it's not that the cards are bad. So the reason the cards are confusing is these used to be Broadcom NetExtreme 2s. Some stuff happened and Broadcom sold the NetExtreme 2 branding and intellectual property to QLogic. So that's why these are QL cards. So they show up with a Broadcom chipset, but they're QLogic cards. The only thing Broadcom sold was the NetExtreme 2 IP. So the NetExtreme 1 and everything like that, those are still Broadcom cards. So this is a QLogic card that has also, QLogic was also bought by yet another company. And so it's really hard to find drivers for these cards. A little bit of rust on this one. I also had 2 bad ones of these that didn't work at all. The other thing I found out is those don't support Windows 10 or Windows 11. So part of what I was fighting was these are unsupported cards. The drivers don't work. Even though they come up, they say they don't work. This is a 4-port fast Intel Fast Ethernet server card, not what we're looking for. This and this look quite similar in terms of layout and a couple of other things. This is the Broadcom variant with the fan. This works with Windows 10. Doesn't work with Windows 10, does work with Windows 10. Actually, not my CAD computer, but my other computer has one of these in it, and it's working just fine. GBX online, everything's good, and comes up the way it should when it starts up. And we can even see this one is the Broadcom variant as opposed to the QLogic variant. So even though they're really, really close, the drivers are slightly different. Even though they're the same chipset, drivers are slightly different. Works just fine. Struggles a lot. I could get it to online with the right GBIC. Kind of randomly, it would hit or miss. I'd have to insert the GBIC about 3 times. Then it would light up the connection. But, yeah, that's what happened. The other thing is I ran into some software problems with Windows 11, to which I've actually cut the cord, and I have backdated both of my 2 core computers to Windows 10. I'm in the process of doing that. They're happily downloading all the software packages, one so I can edit this video and do a couple of other things, getting them back up and running. So I'm back on Windows 10 from 11. I was running into some really strange networking issues on Windows 11 where I have a remote machine that I would connect to every once in a while. First connection would fail, second connection would always work. I'd assumed it was a router problem where my firewall was blocking the traffic for the first time, wasn't generating the tunnel correctly, and then it was, or wasn't generating the, wasn't passing the traffic correctly and getting to the machine that I wanted to connect to, because it did have to traverse the router. They're on different subnets. But same thing was happening after switching to a new router, new firewall, setting it up, new cards, new networking, 10 gig, all the way through. Everything's happening. Still the same thing. First one fails, second one works every time. I also have File Explorer problems in Windows 11 where it'll just lock up and sit there for like 32 minutes and then it just won't, especially when talking to network drive. So there's some networking that needs to be squared off in Windows 11 that it's definitely struggling in right now. I'm sure they'll get it working at some point, but it is having trouble. Coupled with no support and actually very, very limited support for 10 gig NICs in Windows 11 right now. Even more limited support is 10 gig NICs that has an SFP plus port that supports GBICs. I found that out the hard way too. This is a direct attach copper cable, or DAC, as is sometimes listed, for SFP plus ports. So as we can see, we have the same kind of connector that the GBICs have, although we have copper cable that's coming out of the end of the cable connector. These work really, really well in racks where you don't have to go for very long distances. The problem is this is the longest cable that you can get in direct attach copper. It's about, I think it's 9 meters. So doesn't go very far, but it's relatively inexpensive. This seems to always work. Don't quote me on that because I don't have a full catalog list of all the hardware that's out in the world. But for back in the rack with servers and things like that, this works really well. Plugs in, is nice, everything works. It's great. These, which take the SFP connection to fiber, aren't always supported by the network cards. So I ordered one network card and I looked deeper into the compatibility matrix and I found out on every system other than Windows, it'll light up an SFP LC connector. In Windows, it won't. So the $30 card that I found, which was a 10 G-Tech card, if you need laser, it may not work for the application because LC connectors are not supported under Windows. That's why I had to go with the TrendNet. The TrendNet SFP Plus PCI network adapter is working just fine. So this is what's currently running the CAD computer. I actually really like this card, solved some problems for me because this is an 8X PCI connector. And even though I had a 16X port, I only had a 4X slot that I wanted to go in, but I didn't need dual 10 gig NICs, so I didn't need the full 8X PCI bandwidth. This is only a 4X card, so it fit the socket perfectly and everything was good to go. One thing we did have to do was we did have to take the computer. This is an older card these days because the newer cards that support Windows 11 with GBX support, they were in like the $400 range. This was a $70-ish card, so this definitely fits the bill, and I'm okay with it. The only drawback that I have with this card is it is a PCIe Gen 2 card, so I did have to slow down the PCI bus in that computer to get the 10 gig networking to work. I don't game on that computer, so that is not going to be a problem. The only card that might struggle on that one is the graphics card's a little starved for bandwidth, but it doesn't do a lot of heavy lifting unless I'm really rendering a video or not. So we'll have to see what video render times change, but I expect it to be okay. The performance of the computer is still plenty. Some of the other problems I was having is my RAID controller wasn't working on that computer. That seems to have stabilized for now, and everything's running good. The weird thing with the RAID controller on Windows 11, I'd boot the computer, nothing would work. I'd boot it again, the RAID would be up. It was repeatable. I've been doing that for 3 or 4 months. So it's every day, wasn't dying, and that's gone away when I backdated to Windows 10. So I will probably, if Windows 10 does get retired, because it's slated for retiring in October of 2025, if it does retire, I will probably have to reevaluate this and really pick some hardware and be picky about the hardware to get this particular computer where I want it to be. The part number for the Ubiquiti GBX, which I actually really like, they're good price point, good quality for the price point, is a UACC OM MM 10 gig D2. And they'll come in these. You can buy them in a 2-pack or you can buy them in a 20-pack. It was $39 for 2. So not bad for what I used to pay for some of this stuff in server rooms. These were like $800 cards when they were new. So this stuff has come down in price significantly. Networking-wise for the lab, if you guys want to see it, since I'm deeper down the Ubiquiti rabbit hole, I'm finding the price point for value is hitting really well in the prosumer space. Not sure I'd build out a large enterprise with the Ubiquiti equipment, but definitely for home, things like that, absolutely. It's been really, really nice equipment. I'm starting to get my head around how the firewall works, and I have all the network segmentation working the way I want it to. And it'll help prep the channel and the space for future growth, because I do plan on offering some more things to patrons and YouTube community alike. Currently, right now, patrons have access to a NTP time server that I run. It's a Stratum 1 time server. I know some guys are hooking them up to ham radio equipment where they need really precise logging, things like that. I'm using it as a time server for the lab. And in a previous video, we did some 1 PPS comparisons between its 1 PPS output and the 1 PPS output of my GPSDO to see which one should drive the rubidium standard better. If you're interested in that, check out that video. But I'm thinking about taking maybe a 24 or 48 port switch and strapping it to the bench, and that'll give me segmented data access for computers that I work on for clients. It'll bring me some VLANs to the bench. I can use a fiber connection to uplink to the switch stack in the back, and give me some high-speed data on the workbench. I am going to need data logging and a few other things. Probably won't need any 10 gig stuff at the bench other than the switch uplink to the back rack. But for the equipment, things like that, I may carve out another IP space, put all the test equipment in its own IP space, and VLAN it out so it's not, when I'm doing data logging, it's not interfering with the Windows network and it's not very chatty. Because the Windows network can be pretty chatty and the test equipment network talks in a different way. Very similar to iSCSI connections. You do not want iSCSI traffic and IP traffic coexisting in the same VLAN. They will really just drag the network down with the different types of traffic and the switch having to deal with it. It's actually a heavy lift for the switches. So everything's up and running. We're good. If anybody wants to try this 10 gig process, not sure how much value. I can't be the determiner of the value. I can only determine the value to myself. It made sense for us because we have better than, I have a 2 gig symmetric pipe at the lab now. So to take advantage of that, I needed to be on 2.5 or 10 gig. That's kind of what's driving all of this. And we're thinking about opening up the channel and doing some live streams. So I wanted to have the bandwidth available to live stream out and get some things going. So let me know in the comments if that's something you'd like to see. With that, I'm going to clean up the bench, get some things set up, and finish making Windows 10 home again. So with that, Patreons are 4 videos ahead, and in between all the videos, I do read all the comments, and I love talking to people down in the comment section below. If you have anything you'd like to see, comment suggestions, concerns that you'd like to see with the channel, drop me a line, and we'll see what we can make happen. As always, more is on the way, and I will see everybody in the next video.